All right, fantastic. Happy Thursday, Mark. Good to finally catch up after a few weeks. Summer
Absolutely.
is finishing up in the Northern Hemisphere, and so you and I have been talking about starting out a series of these, at least do one or two and see where it kind of goes.
Yeah,
You tend to, in my mind at least, be one of my top three go to on the polymath, the building, the investing, the international side. And we're going to do a little bit of a special start at the very least on Tesla, which we'll dig into later. But maybe for folks that don't know about you, Mark, we could give them just a quick background on how you kind of came up into the world and what you're working on kind of today. And then let's shift after that, talk about Mr. Elon Musk, right?
that's good. So my background, I'll keep it very short, but I'm Dutch originally, although as a kid I lived also in the US for a while, in the Caribbean. Studied in Holland economics, also spent 6 months in France studying économie appliquée, applied economics. After university, I joined Mercedes-Benz in their headquarters in Stuttgart in the International Management Trainee Program. After 3 months, I was already sent to Jakarta, Indonesia. So that was my first Asia experience, actually, which I really loved. Spent the next 7 years at Mercedes-Benz, and the last 3 years of those spent in Beijing as regional controller for Northeast Asia for all the Mercedes-Benz and Daimler-Benz activities in there.
And that was quite early in China, right? Like,
Yeah,
you were
so I
kind of
moved to
one of the
China late
few.
'99. So that was,
Yeah,
I mean, I loved it. When I moved there, there weren't that many foreigners yet, but
yeah.
during the 3 years that I worked for as an expat that really changed. Quit my job 2002, went on to study Mandarin Chinese in Beijing on university, and then started my first business. Did several businesses and beginning mostly small businesses, some trading activities, some consulting, and started reading a lot. And then I became active in the film industry in China, created what turned out to be China's first reality TV show.
Yeah.
And doing that, actually, I realized that television in China, at least, didn't really have a very bright future. I thought, that can be done online. That's better. But that didn't exist yet, right? There was no online video at that time. So I decided to create the first online video site in China together with a good friend, business partner, Gary Wang. We grew this into a fairly large company and took it public about 7 years later, on the NASDAQ, $1 billion company. And then sold it in 2014 to Alibaba after merging with our main competitor for almost $5 billion. So it was a pretty good success. I at the same time also ran a game studio in China, so did more than one thing there. And in 2013, I decided to leave China and move to Vancouver, Canada. Originally
Like a real
to
Chinese entrepreneur who's done well.
That's right.
You got to tick the box.
No, I mean
Got it.
Vancouver was a beautiful place to live anyway. I lived there for almost a decade. And in Vancouver, my original plan was to retire, but it lasted about 6 weeks. Tired of it. I mean, you cannot go from working 24/7 to, just
Just
sitting at
stop it.
home. I was
Yeah.
living on a golf course in my backyard and the sea in my front yard. So the perfect location for retirement, but I couldn't do it. So anyway, but the lucky thing was during those 6 weeks, actually, the Cyprus banking crisis happened, and and I had a lot of time on hand. So I was looking at what does this actually mean? How come certain banks are able to lock up your capital, not give your money back, and and I was looking at how does the banking system work, and then through that actually I found Bitcoin in early 2013. Hence I started to invest in Bitcoin early on, and that was good timing. I joined a VC fund as well for a couple of years there, also starting in 2013. And then in 2017, I decided to go full time into crypto and set up a few businesses there. Set up a Bitcoin investment trust, set up a private company called First Block Capital. That's basically this investment company. Set up the first publicly listed Bitcoin mining company, Hut 8 Mining, listed on the NASDAQ now. Yeah, after that, basically in 2022, I decided to leave Canada and
Mhm.
move back to Asia. First, I lived in Koh Samui, Thailand, for a year, and then basically last year I decided to move to Singapore, and that's where I'm based right now. And my focus is really, yeah, mostly my own investments. I spent literally hours per day reading and thinking about the next big thing. But what's the next big thing that could happen? For me, that is AI at this point. I think AI is gonna be even bigger than than crypto has been. That's my daily life. And enjoying life, doing a lot of sports, trying to keep healthy, but also still work quite hard and looking for the next big thing.
No, I love it. I love it. Listen, so many tangents, and hopefully we'll save most of them for the future. But and a lot to unpack. As I said, you're a true polymath from everything that I've experienced. When you and I sometimes catch up, 3 hours go by. We've talked about everything from geo transformation to nuclear energy to crypto to AI, get into to Mars and so on. But you're also pretty prolific on Twitter. We'll share your handle with the video here. And one of the few people out there that's not afraid to have their name as well as their views, which is super welcoming in X nowadays. And one of the things that caught my eye, I think it was maybe 2.5 months ago, I believe, was when you said you had found something potentially even more compelling than Bitcoin, at least from a returns perspective, over the next 10 years. And that happened to be a small company called Tesla. Maybe we could do this setup for the people who are going to be either watching this or reading it, and maybe we can cover like history, your history with coming across Tesla, Elon, maybe how you see the scenario today, and then of course more importantly how you've been so adamant about what the future could unfold for this company. And I believe in your words, how could this company has the potential to become the most valuable company in the world, which is saying a lot because we obviously are sitting with companies that are over 3 trillion today. I think last I checked with Tesla, it's maybe been in the 600 to 800 billion range. It's well off its all-time highs. So maybe we can kind of work that pathway up to get your overall investment thesis, if that resonates, right?
Yeah, no, that works for sure. It's interesting is that what I forgot actually. I've been a Tesla investor actually about 11 years ago. I invested in
Okay.
Tesla in
Yeah.
2013. I totally forgot about it because I actually sold my shares at that point to buy Bitcoin. Some of my shares.
Got it.
Um,
So you're just reversing it, right?
yeah,
It's
I mean, I was the thing is I went through my old emails and did a search
yeah.
on Tesla, but I wasn't sure whether I ever wrote about it in the past. And then I came across some tweets where I was really defending Tesla against short sellers. That in 2013, 2014 already. And then I realized, hey, I was actually holding a small position in Tesla at that time, and that grew substantially during that time. But I
Got it.
sold
And
it
of course,
for
you had a background in the auto industry. Can you give people, because there's a lot of
yeah,
people just don't realize the structural paradigm shift that basically has been because of Elon Musk and EV. Like this was someone who was challenging, established automakers that had been in business for decades, if not 100 plus years, that was sitting with billions of cash on their balance sheet. And it was
yeah.
this one company in America, right, who was going to do manufacturing, right, to challenge this. I mean, could you give people more a sense of what the times was and just how crazy and delusional this sounded? Because I don't think it's really appreciated today, right?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, car companies are always big companies. I mean, I mean, sure, there are some smaller ones but in the end, you need scale, you need economies of scale to to be able to produce at a price point that people can afford it. I mean, supercars you can build, just a few units, but if you want a normal car, anything but below $100,000, you need scale. You cannot do this as a startup. So that's one. The second thing is car companies are very conservative. They know their customer base. They don't want to come up with something radically different because they're afraid of their brand. You don't want to lose your brand. That's your brand name is super important for cars. I mean, people, if you mention a car brand, you like I drive a Mercedes, people think something about you. They assume you're this kind of person. If you drive a BMW, you're maybe more sportive. If you come, Porsche, everything, all these brands have a certain niche that they
Catered to,
fill,
yeah.
and they don't want to get out of that niche. So the downside is, of course, that you're not willing to take big risks and go in a different direction. Well, Elon realized, hey, long-term cars are not going to use the IC engine anymore, the internal combustion engine. So what you use for with gas, with diesel. No, they're going to use an electric engine. So when 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 Elon got involved in Tesla, I mean, the company already existed. Actually, he called himself a founder. He wasn't really a founder, but he got in very early and put a lot of capital in and put all his effort in. So he made himself a founder basically. He decided to change the history of the car industry. And to be honest, I did not think he would pull it off
Mm,
in those days. But
yeah.
of course, I couldn't invest. I wasn't it wasn't publicly listed yet. And so, but I've been following him a little bit from the early days with PayPal, but I didn't think he was able to pull it off. But once he went public, I realized, well, and I started following. I was like, he has a real chance actually,
Mm,
because he has some money now. I still didn't think he would be able to grow into a big company, but I thought it's going to be a small company. And indeed, the Roadster, that's the first car they launched. I thought
yeah.
that might be their main car basically. That's my thinking.
But at least it
Then he
was
got
it
the
was a
Model S.
going concern, whereas in before it just the probability wasn't
Correct.
high, right? Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Awesome.
And then I realized what he's doing. He's literally changing the assumptions about how you build a car
Yeah.
completely from the traditional car companies. So, he's a first principles thinker, basically meaning he's willing to go to the core of production, or the core of anything, and just assume that everything people are doing and that's been working well for decades may actually not be the optimal solution. And that's what he's been doing. And that's made him successful. He's willing to risk all his money, all his time, his life basically on something new, and he did it with electric vehicles. He became the biggest EV company in the world,
Mm,
and also the most profitable one. Actually, probably the only profitable one in the world at this point. Maybe BYD is profitable. I'm not sure,
yeah.
but he positive cash flow, reinvesting all the money in new things. Car companies normally bring out a new model every 5, 6, 7 years, and every 2, 3 years they change. Almost every year they change a little bit on the car. The Model S is basically the same as it was when it was introduced back in 2012. I don't know,
Yeah.
12 years ago.
Yeah.
It hasn't really changed. So he says you don't need to do this. Why do this, right? It's not necessary, and it works. People that drive a Tesla realize, wow, this is actually very, very different from normal cars, and they love it.
Yeah.
And it literally takes a test drive to figure it out, maybe more than one test drive. Of course, the media has been against him for a long time because the incumbents, the big car companies, especially in the US and in Germany, they don't like this. They're afraid of him.
Yeah.
At first, they weren't afraid. They were like,
They were
"Oh, this
laughing,
guy
right? They
playing."
thought he was an idiot, right?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, he's an idiot, and he can never pull this off. But he pulled it off, and now he's actually taking their market share away. Worse, people are switching all to EVs, and the other car companies, none of them, none of the big ones, is able to make a good EV at a decent price point. They're making good EVs, but their price point is way too high.
yeah.
Nobody can get to the price point where Elon's at. Nobody has the batteries and the battery technology that Elon has at that price point. Um, and now what you're seeing is that Elon's treating the car as an iPhone basically, right? It's not a product to drive you from A to B. It's actually an electronic gadget that you can update over the air, and that whole concept is so foreign to any other car maker that I think big car makers will all be out of business in the next 5 to 6 years. So
Wow.
quickly going.
Wow. Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. That's a huge testament from, someone who was a rising star within, one of the blue chip car makers of them all, which is Mercedes Benz, right?
Mhm.
Um, let me see if I can bring up the chart here just to give a bit of kind of context to what we're talking about here, because again, this is a pretty prolific, story as a whole. So I don't know if you could see that coming through to you.
Yeah, I
This
see
is
it.
going
Yep.
to be
Yep.
the Tesla chart. So let's maybe go
Yep.
out on the monthly, right? So we
Yep.
can see here we list tail end of 2011,
Mhm.
2010 actually, middle of
Yep.
2010.
Yep.
Um, you started to follow it, as you said, kind of, or follow it more, I should say, 2012,
Yeah.
2013 here.
2013. Yeah. And then I
Yeah.
sold it end of 2013 for Bitcoin to early 2014. So
Yeah, exactly. So then you reversed on kind of the portfolio stuff, and then here you can
yep.
see the thing. So you can see, it's actually
Yep.
one of the few tech names that's off of the highs. The things that were astonishing to me, and this was, later than when you were starting to look at it, but I remember looking at it at 2014, 2015, and I
Mhm.
still think it's a story today. Those two camps, they're the ones that just absolutely love everything about Tesla, and there are those that just completely hate everything it does,
Yep.
right? And what's also interesting about that latter camp is they tend to do a lot of that hate on maybe Elon Musk as an individual rather than actually looking at the track record and actually maybe looking at the real fundamentals,
Correct.
of the company. But I remember back when it was, maybe worth 20 to 40 billion. And I remember thinking, if you're a Saudi Arabia or Norway, where you're default long oil and for all intents and purposes, the oil industry, this should be a no-brainer to buy, right? Just as a hedge, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Buy a hedge for the future, and I would still think that that argument makes sense today, even at $720 billion market cap. But I also do remember a few things back here that were interesting that I think still hold true today. One was they were competing against traditional car makers who, as you and I both know, had to start creating something that competes with their most profitable products. Always tough to do, right? How are you going to pioneer EV when you have so much, if not 99.9% of your earnings, your revenue, your brand in old, combustible engines? So that was number one. Like, it was definitely not going to be coming from there. Two, to you said, the thing about economies of scale is it's a two-edged sword because it's very, very hard to start afresh, if ever. And also you've been successful so long. But then the other one, I think maybe a bit thematic when we start to talk about today and then the future of how you look at it, was this argument. Is it a car company? Is it an energy company? Right? What is it? And a lot of visceral debate around that. Um, and it's just been really, really interesting to see the rise of it. Of course, this big gap here we're seeing is the effects of all the money that was happening with COVID. So there's a lot of charts that have this epic rise from.
I cannot see the numbers here because it's too small, but it's
Sure,
amazing
sure.
where it went during that time, right?
I mean,
I
we
mean,
can
this,
we could just try and get some estimates. So we got to a low of about 1235. This here's
yeah.
June 2019, and then we got to a bit of a high. I mean, yeah, it was 3,000, 300%, right? It's insane,
I mean, it's
right?
crazy. That is just, in such a short period of time, it's Nvidia like. I mean, that's what it is.
Yeah,
And then we'll get to that later, but I think it will surpass this actually over the next couple of years.
yeah,
But we've
yeah.
seen here it's going to happen again, but then at even a bigger scale. What you're really seeing is there is some people finally understand what he was doing. What he was doing at that point, Elon was building an EV company, and
Yeah,
he now stopped doing that. In my opinion, it's still an EV company, and that's how the world sees it. But actually, in reality, he's building on something. He's building something completely different for the future. Wall Street sees it as an EV company. That's why the valuation is still. I mean, it's it's a much higher valuation than any other car company has for sure. But
sure.
if you look at where it's going to go in the future, I mean, most Wall Street analysts have no idea. They all say, that's we Elon cannot pull his ideas off. I always say, never bet against Elon. I mean, he
Yeah,
lives on a different time scale for sure. He's always too optimistic, and I
yeah,
recognize it for myself in a way, right? I'm
yeah,
also too early with many things, like when my Bitcoin predictions, but eventually always come true for Elon, and you know, so anything he says, if he says it's going to happen next year, well, it's maybe going to happen in 2 years, but it's going to
yeah,
happen. I mean,
yeah.
everything he did, and not just with Tesla, the same with SpaceX. I mean, with a smaller budget than Boeing, he managed to build something that's far superior. He built rockets that can land. Who could have imagined that only 10 years ago that a startup would be able to do that? If you look at what he's doing with the Boring Company, for example, completely new ideas, with Hyperloop, um, Twitter. I mean, it's I don't know how he does it, and especially how he does it time wise, because it is quite amazing, right? But he's doing it, and so and he's extremely strategic. What he's doing is basically,
Yeah.
um, yeah, he's telling you what the future will look like, and then he builds something that will be useful in the future. And he's mostly doing it now with Tesla and with AI, and it's just incredible. I think what will happen there over the next couple of years. So it's
Okay.
not a it's not an EV company anymore. Shall we just go where I think it's going to go,
Yeah,
or
let's go
yeah?
to where you think it's going to go. Break it down into taxonomy as how you'd like. Because what's fascinating to me is a lot of the things that were, I guess you could say, whether you want to talk about it as headwinds, whether you want to talk about it as kind of making it harder to see the fundamentals. They're actually still intact today, right? It's
Mhm.
still the company that the mainstream media likes to hate because they hate
Yeah,
the person, right? We've
right.
seen the snubbing. I think, one of the most amazing ones for me was when Biden had the EV summit. I think it was like
Yeah.
2 years ago or whatever, and Tesla wasn't even invited, which to me was just, you
It's
could
it's a
disagree
total
with the
joke.
person, but
Yeah.
you can't disagree with
Well,
the result.
the same with Time Magazine this week. I'm not sure if you see
Yeah.
that today. They had the
Oh yeah,
top
the cover
100
of AI.
AI. Who
Yeah.
wasn't in there?
Yeah.
Well, Elon Musk wasn't in there, even though he was a co-founder of OpenAI. He's a founder of XAI. Grok is
Yeah.
one of the top LLMs in the world. And Tesla is the only real-time AI company at this point, in my opinion. It's they're building anyway, it's a joke, right? It's a joke.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mainstream
Yeah.
media is showing its true colors, and
But that's great from individual investors who may be looking at it now, because it shows that the real valuation is not yet in, right?
quite
And
so.
it'll take a while for that to kind of come through. So
Yeah.
let's break it down, Mark. Like, how should people think about? As you said, it's not an EV company anymore. It probably has not been for a while. It had switched into what I believe was actually an energy company, and once you looked at it from that, it was totally different. But now
Yeah.
you've said that that's also morphing, right? How would you cut the parts, or what's the taxonomy as how you see it today?
Yeah, so if I would describe it in a few years, I would say it's an integrated AI mobility company. So in Tesla right now, it's a car company that sells cars to people. In the future, I think it will stop selling cars.
Okay.
It will still produce cars, but these are not the same cars we have right now. These will be autonomous vehicles using fully self-driving technology, AI technology. That's different from any other AI self-driving technology out there. We can get into that later.
Yeah.
So those are basically robot taxis. They will produce robot taxis and they will transport people and it's going to be much cheaper than owning a car basically using these robot
Yeah.
taxis.
Not to
So
mention much more efficient, just
and
all the
more
way you
efficient. I
cut and
mean,
slice it, right? Yeah.
what we're seeing in Singapore at this point already is that most people don't own a car because it's too expensive. But instead, you use a Grab, or in
Yeah.
other countries, an Uber. So these robot taxis will be the same as a Grab system, but at a price point 5-6 times lower than what you currently pay for a Grab or for a taxi. So
Yeah.
making it
Yeah.
really affordable to do it.
It's insane because you spend so much for a car. Yeah, the utilization of it is so low. It just
Yeah,
sits there.
correct.
It's
Yeah,
maybe utilizing for, I don't know, 10%, 20% at the most, right? For most people
less
in
than
a
that,
day.
less than
And
that actually. I
right,
think it's
but
less.
it's much less than that for the vast
Yeah,
majority. So it's just
yeah,
this underutilized asset, takes a lot of resources to put together, does a huge amount of, damage into the climate and so on. It's gonna change like how society even works, like paving, roads,
yeah.
all of these things. Yeah.
Yeah, so what will happen is robot taxis, they will be electric vehicles, obviously, fully
Yeah.
self-driving, and they could be on the road for up to 20 hours per day.
Yeah.
So the remaining time is basically for recharging them, for automatic cleaning systems, for repairs if any, but there are not many repairs for an EV. And
Yeah.
I think what will happen is that if Tesla will not sell these anymore, they're actually going to make the same amount of money from selling them as they now will earn from the car in 1 year by this renting it out basically. So and given that the car will be on the road for 5, 6, maybe 10 years, they're going to make 5, 6, or 10 times as much money on a robot taxi than on a normal car. There's all these stories about what you can do with robot cars. It's more than a taxi. You can make it into a driving hotel room, for example. You can make it into a driving restaurant. It's like literally, if you live in New York and you want to go to Florida, you get into your car, have dinner in the car, watch a movie, go to sleep, and literally wake up in Florida the next day.
Yeah.
Those are mobility ideas that nobody even thinks about at this point. So robotaxi is going to be big for Tesla. The analysts, for example, if you look at our ARK Invest, Cathy Woods, they think
Yeah.
that just robo taxis will lead to a valuation increase of Tesla by about 10x.
Yeah.
And that's going to be by 2029, so the next 5 years. So, going from a stock price of currently $230 to $2,500 by 2029.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what they expect just for robotaxi. But the thing is, robotaxi is actually not the biggest thing they're doing.
Yeah.
The biggest thing is the third thing I want to talk about. There's a second thing I want to talk about first,
Sure.
because we're talking about an integrated company. An integrated company is a company that basically produces most things itself. Many of the car companies in the world, they outsource everything to OEMs. And these OEMs, they actually produce much more slow often. due to different constraints. They're not able to well, not always true, by the way, but in general they're more expensive than doing it in-house if you do it efficiently like Elon Musk does it.
Yeah.
So what Elon's doing right now is they are building their batteries themselves. He has these gigafactories where battery packs are being produced for cars, but also for companies. So you can buy these battery packs for homes, but also businesses where you can literally use your electricity once the power goes off or for different reasons. And that battery business, it's called Tesla Energy, is growing extremely fast.
Mm.
I forgot the exact numbers, but I think it went up 50% over the past 6 months. I mean, this is
Mhm.
something that's up and coming that many analysts are not really looking at, or that they're underestimating, or they don't really see it coming. Once again, it is there in the books, but
Sure.
I think they seem not to understand why this is going to go.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, Tesla Energy is interesting, but the most important thing for this is actually that these batteries cannot just be used for cars and businesses, but also for something else. And that else is going to be robots.
Mm.
And that's really the real big thing, I think, where Tesla is going to show the world that it's going to be the most valuable company in the world within a few years because of humanoid robots. Tesla developed a robot called Optimus, and this is a robot that looks like a human, so humanoid it's called.
Yeah.
And this robot can basically do anything. For example, put one in your house and it can do your dishes, do the laundry, clean your house. But it
Yeah.
can also take care of your kids or can teach your kids math. Or
Mhm.
it can help you to make a PowerPoint presentation for the next day or help you learn to play piano. And then at night, when you go to sleep, you send the robot away to a factory to work in a factory for you. So when you wake up in the morning, the robot made $200 for you, right? And so this is where it's going to go. Literally the biggest thing in the world. These robots will replace the whole labor force eventually. Maybe not
Mm.
the whole labor force, but like literally 90% plus. Now, what's important to understand, Kay, is that labor is the
Yeah.
biggest part of GDP. So if a robot takes over the labor force or 90% of the labor force, it means the biggest part of GDP is taken over by robots. The company that will lead this and will be the number one in this is going to be so incredibly big that we cannot really believe, cannot understand it. This is,
Mm.
GDP is such a it's so unbelievably large that
Yeah.
Tesla is going to be literally a 30, 40, 50 trillion dollar company. So the
Yeah.
biggest company in the world right now is 3.5 trillion, maybe a little bit less now.
Yeah.
Let's say $3 to $4 trillion. They're going to be 10 times bigger based on humanoids only than the current biggest company in the world. And
Mm.
at this point, Tesla still has to grow 5 times just to become the biggest company in the world, right? So it means a
Yeah.
50x increase in the current stock price over the next 5 to 10 years. That is really what I'm seeing in Tesla and what analysts are not seeing at this point. And it's incredible what's going to happen there. These humanoids, I mean, it's a whole different story. You can go really deep into this. How does it work? How are they going to make money on it? But the most important thing for me is that it will change the world as we know it. The world we live in. We're going to live in a very different world in 5 to 10 years from now. And Tesla is going to be the one who's doing this. And the question is really, do you believe that Elon can pull this off? And a lot of people are doubters. They say, "Well, no, he cannot." I'm like, "Of course he can, because building a humanoid is much easier than building a car. It's a much
Yeah.
easier thing. He has everything. He has the components, he has the batteries, and very important, he has the AI. Because in the end, a humanoid is an AI machine. It's just AI in a skeleton, basically, in an exoskeleton. That's what it is. And he has it. He's
Yeah.
building
I
it,
mean,
and he's getting better at it.
and I remember this was really what resonated when we were jamming with, because again, we're not dealing with like a first time founder. Like we're literally dealing with someone who's pulled the outlier of outlier events,
Yep.
whether it was X, whether it was Tesla, whether it was SpaceX again, which,
Yep.
I'm sure we'll do a whole different kind of conversation. And Elon's probably going to be the first person to get to $1 trillion, right?
No
And
doubt
it's
about it.
and when what I love about people like Elon is it also just shows you just how amazing this world is. You don't need 100 Elon Musks, right, to really
Correct.
potentially positively change the the shape and the direction that we as a species are moving, as well as the planet.
Yep.
But I remember going back to the robotics part when you said what a lot of these people are missing is you still are going to need to scale. So you need
Hmm.
the manufacturing and the production,
Yeah.
you need the energy, and then to your point, you need the AI, right? And he's got the energy, he's definitely got the manufacturing and production. And I think the AI is again, one of these parts where, first of all, what was possible in robotics 3 years ago has basically gone up multiples in regards to, it's just been powered by AI. It's this analogy of you wake up, your Tesla's got a software upgrade and it's
Yep.
much better, but it's even bigger now since the whole transformer, revolution, if you will.
Yep.
Can you give people the context on the AI part of X? Because I think a lot of people are sleeping on Grok, on the capabilities there as
Yeah.
well,
I
right?
mean, Grok is basically, I would say, a copy of ChatGPT. That's maybe the easy way to describe it because people know ChatGPT. Grok is built into X, into Twitter, and so I use it for my Google searches because I'm on Twitter all the time, right?
Yeah.
So it's on my phone, always open. If I'm on Twitter and have a question about something, I'll just search it. So I look for it in Grok, ask Grok the question about it. But Grok can do anything. It creates AI art. It can write essays. It can make summaries. It can summarize YouTube videos. But even better, because it's real time, when I wake up in the morning, one of the first things I do is ask Grok, okay, what happened over the past 6, 7 hours when I was asleep?
Mm.
Was there anything important in my timeline, or did I miss anything in this field? It's so much easier than scrolling for half an hour through your timeline, figuring out is there anything that I missed. So it saves a lot of time. Grok is,
Yeah.
is as good as ChatGPT, and then it's basically free. I actually don't know if it's free for everyone. I think it is, but the point is, I'm still paying for ChatGPT because I'm so used to it. But in fact, Grok is very similar, and I think for the average user, you will not really see a difference. Um, Grok is
Yeah,
actually
I
more
mean,
fun in a way because you can choose the fun mode, right? So because
yeah. I mean, I love playing
yeah,
around with the fun
that's
mode.
that's
So, I
fun. But
mean,
this Grok AI, this Grok LM, is really what will be integrated into the Optimus robot. So it's part of it. So you basically have a talking LLM in
yeah,
your house or wherever it is.
let's just generate something here on the fly,
Yeah,
doing all the work. And the best part is also you don't even have to necessarily get all your spelling right, which is great for my 6-year-old daughter because she can still, get the heavy lifts done,
yeah,
right? So here is just generating something very random. Future where EV and robo taxis are a big part of the world.
yeah.
A lot of Optimus robots doing all the work. And
No,
then
mhm.
we could just refresh that if we're not happy with it. And me being a sci-fi geek, I've literally spent hours on this.
Yeah,
Okay, let's do a new one. Kind of Mars robots. We'll do a Mars one, of course,
yeah,
tribute to Elon. Yeah, I think the speed is also one of the things that's really shocking. I mean, we do a lot of work on AI, but that,
yeah,
and then of course, fun mode is great to kind of play around with.
yeah,
Going back, I think on the different kind of AI moats or lack thereof, if you will. Because the interesting thing was for a long time we had the whole. I'll just leave your Twitter handle up here, so if people want to kind of connect and follow in some of the works that you could do, you can see you
mhm,
get very detailed and very deep on the different works. But like the interesting thing about the software that's eating the world, which was obviously very much that statement was pioneered by Andreessen, and now we have this case of maybe where software is eating itself
yeah.
where one LLM comes up with an upgrade that's new and fantastic today, and already before the night is out, it's already been surpassed.
Oh, I was reading
And
this
then it
article
comes,
yesterday about this
yeah,
this this U.S. public company. Forgot the name, but they basically are replacing Salesforce now with an LLM. I mean, if I'd be a
yeah,
Salesforce investor, I would have sold all my shares yesterday. After I read it, I was like, oh god, people don't
yeah.
see what's going to come. Yeah. So
We have a startup that we invested. I think I even told you about it with Rev Up, and basically with just a handful of people, we can be doing what
mhm,
was possible in other companies. I know there was Klarna. I
yeah,
don't know if this is the right one, but so for people that don't know, this was the classic buy now, pay later, was one of the darlings during the peaks of course, the last cycle.
yeah,
But of course, also had to do a massive write down. Still alive, of course, you got to give them that. but they replaced a massive amount of their sales team. Some of the things that they did was starting to add kind of $20 million to the bottom line. So what's happening is real. It's not just a drill or hypothetical in a few years, but the changes are huge. But tying it back to different LLMs and AI, I guess you could say gateways, for lack of a better word. So everyone knows ChatGPT, there's Perplexity, there's Claude, of course. There's a whole bunch of other ones. I think Grok is still something that actually not a lot of people are still not really on top of. And there's of course Grok with a Q from Chamat's kind of camp. But
Yeah.
one of the main things that I find with these is they take up a lot of money, they take up a lot of energy. It's an arms race. We've also had a lot of missteps. We've seen the AI works from Google's camp
Yeah.
that changes
Yeah.
names every other kind of 2 weeks as a whole. But the key thing I think that going to differentiate some of the ones that are still going to be here 3, 5, 10 years from now is one big one is the moat of where's the data from.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you've seen this thing where you're using a whole bunch of different LLMs and they actually are returning the same thing to you, relatively speaking. And it's because a lot of them has been built up.
It's actually for very niche topics, it's very different sometimes. But for bigger topics, yeah, for sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly, exactly. And I think that was also the fascinating thing that Google, where they've still left YouTube out there. And I think
Yeah.
that may have been part of their agreement when they did pick up YouTube. Whereas in with Grok, it has X and it
Yeah.
has all the information on Twitter. And that you'll never be able to access unless, of course, there's a change in regards to what
Yeah.
Elon wants from a
Yeah.
chat GPT
Yeah.
or Claude and so on and so forth. And I think
Well,
those kind of ecosystems are really valuable.
and what I like about Grok, it's actually pretty neutral. If
Yes.
people, that's if you ask some negative things about Elon Musk, it will tell you that right away.
Yes. Yeah.
That's what I like about it. With ChatGPT, you never really know. With Gemini, you never really know how much censorship is in there. With Grok, and that's good.
No, it's very very well said. And I've done a few exercises with the squad where you ask something negative about Trump on a Chat GPT or Claude or whatever. It's no issue. You try and do it with a Biden or Kamala, and it's a
Yeah.
whole different thing. So one against here we're just asking why do people hate Elon so much? Look at this, the billionaire conundrum. I
Yeah.
love how it starts. The enigma of Elon Musk and the chorus of disdain that often surrounds him. Here's a lighthearted outside look at why some humans might harbor less than loving feelings towards him. A lot of these are relevant and have been, key points, right? From
Yeah.
the things with the cave to, of course, Twitter. People think of how they should be policed and so on, and that kind of also just shows, how much more real kind of it is. So bringing it back to where we are with Tesla. So as you said, it's got these elements that are not priced in by any measure. One is, of course, just EV and energy of what it historically has been because of a big kind of movement against him or the powers that be controlling as much of the narrative as at least they can, which is probably the biggest thing that he took out from them by buying Twitter, i.e. X today. To now it's added this layer of, as you said, robotics, right?
Mhm.
Humanoids, and the game changing effect of what that will do in regards to taking away labor. So labor will now become more and more capital, but it then, for all intents and purposes, allows people where why own a car when you can own an EV that can also work for you? Why hire somebody when you can actually have your own Optimus that helps you in the house and then also goes out and works,
Yeah.
right? I don't know if that, in essence, has everybody as being part builder, part investor, but it's really changing the
Yeah.
paradigm.
So the way I see that part
Yeah,
actually, if you want to become really wealthy, you should buy as many Optimus robots as you can.
got it.
And because I
Yeah,
think that's you basically your own labor, your own,
workforce.
and
Yeah,
because I think a lot of people may not be able to afford a robot. I mean, these things are going to be the production cost. Elon said will be eventually around $20,000, but they will not sell for 20,000. They will go for 50, 60. I don't know. Maybe who knows? Or they'll do a revenue share. They sell you a robot, and if you want to make money of it, like Apple gets 30% of every app, maybe Tesla gets 30% of every dollar you make with your robot. It's possible. But I mean, I
yeah,
think that's where the real money is because these robots they can create $100,000 a year. You can make 5 times what a robot costs per year just by buying one. So buy 10 of them
Or you could even have crowdfunding. Maybe a community buys a few
Yeah,
amounts of EVs and robots for that neighborhood or that area of the city and so on, and it's used collectively. It goes into a pool. Maybe you and I should look into doing a DAO for this to fund, Optimus robots
nice.
and EVs, and people can kind of get synthetic exposure to that way. If you can't buy a full one, maybe you could own a token or something in it.
Well, I was recently approached by someone who wanted to do something like this for the robot taxis. So once they come out, buy 20 of them, whatever. Basically, put them in an Uber or a Grab fleet, and yeah, make money.
I guess you'd say, setting sun industry that is the auto space. Like, is this just one big structural short? Is there any respite? Should they just, call it in early? Like, how do you see this kind of playing out as way? I'm sure they will say they'll make the argument that they're on the EV train. They're going to come through, even though I've seen you and you've also highlighted it. A lot of them are throwing the towel in or moving from EV to hybrid, so on and so forth. How do you see that playing
Yeah,
out?
I mean, I still talk to some former Mercedes-Benz, Daimler colleagues,
Sure.
and they don't see what's coming. They still don't see it. They're like, no,
Yeah.
no, we're fine, and people don't want to. People they say people don't want to drive EVs. I'm like,
Yeah.
no,
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
don't want to drive expensive EVs. No, people want hybrids. I said, no. If people can get a good EV with a good charging system, and the thing is, the media still talk about this anxiety about that you can't charge it, when you're driving long distance. That's not true. Well, the anxiety is true, but the thing is, this is something that was 10 years ago the case. Not anymore. Most countries in the
Yeah.
world, even in Thailand, actually, you can
Yeah.
charge your car everywhere. Yeah, that's quite
Yeah.
amazing. So,
Yeah.
my colleagues, they don't see it. Maybe it's also a bit self-preservation, right? You don't want to talk negative about your own company. And maybe secretly or in private, they're worried about their jobs because, look, these jobs may be gone in the next couple of years. Your company is gone, or the company may not be gone. Mercedes will still be there probably, but it will not be a big car company anymore. It will be a niche car company. There's always going to be
Yeah.
people maybe who want to buy, invest in internal combustion engine cars and high end luxury. Like there are people that buy $1 million sports cars. That's fine.
Yeah.
It's but that's not what Tesla will build.
A lot of these issues and the arguments against EVs were the same thing that the first car on the industrial side and the combustible engine had to go through. Was there going to be a petrol station after the
Yeah,
petrol run out? That
that's
was a key concern when it started. But I could
yeah,
also see this where you even now have with younger generations where it's like they don't even get a driver's license
yeah,
because, again, they don't need it. So even this like needing to drive, it's going to change. People won't even think about that. It'll be like, no, that's just how you get from A to B. Something comes up and picks you up, and you can decide in what form you want to travel, as in restaurant lunch meeting, sleeping, or just a quick ping over and kind of back. It's
indeed.
completely changing that paradigm. All right. Anything else to add, or any kind of closing thoughts on your side, Mark? The summary of what we're hearing is you see Tesla going to 30, 40, 50 trillion from today's 720 billion just to get to the biggest company in the world today is a 5x. So you could see a 50x kind of movement. And you're basically seeing that over the next 10 years. As you broke it down, even before you start to talk robotics, AI, just going into robo taxis as based by Arc, Kathy Woods, that's already just a 10x there. And what a lot of people do miss is these Wall Street analysts, they can't give you a forecast for 5 years. They're
Yeah.
supposed to cover the next quarter,
Yeah.
maybe at most the next year. So even if they know that it's gonna, they would never put a report saying 50x as a whole. But any other kind of closing thoughts, or what you're looking
Yeah, so
for,
there's
what you're
one
anticipating?
important
Yeah,
thing that's not being talked about enough. It's the negative consequences of humanoids and of robot taxis. And everybody will lose their jobs, right? Or most people
yeah,
lose their jobs, meaning they have no income. So this has to be financed somehow. And that is actually a potential risk as well for Tesla. Because what I think is going to happen is that the big AI companies will be the ones footing the bill for people that lose their jobs. And I've been thinking that through a little bit more over the past couple of weeks because originally I was like, okay, yeah, that may happen, and then that's fine. If they do that. But the thing is, of course, that most of the AI companies are U.S.
but
They're
also,
not.
how does it happen? Does the government seize the shares for the greater good
No,
of
they won't.
society?
I don't think it's going to be seasonal shares because these companies will just they'll move out. It's really a tax. So my worry was originally okay, because they're mostly U.S. companies. What's going to happen to people in Europe, people in Asia?
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
is the U.S. going to pay for those? I don't think so. So it's one reason why the US actually is in a very good position without realizing it. But then I thought a bit more about it, and I think what actually might happen in the future is that these humanoids robots will get taxed. So like we're now
Mm,
taxing people, we'll tax the robots. So
sure.
you send your robot to work in a factory overnight, and the robot earns $100. Well, first of all, Tesla gets 30, and then after the remaining 70, you pay half to the government. I think that's how it
Something
may.
like that.
But that also means, of course, that if Tesla gets taxed on this, or if humanoids get taxed, Tesla may not become a $50 trillion company. It may be lower than this. But
Sure,
I mean,
sure.
still, it's still going to be much bigger than Nvidia is right now.
Yeah,
They may be 10 to 20 trillion, which is still a very very nice multiple from currently over, and that over the next couple of years. So
yeah, yeah. And
yeah,
I think just for the record, also, it's again, it's not that you're not bullish on Bitcoin. It's just like you can't see 50x on Bitcoin going from today's 1 trillion over the next 10 years, right?
um,
Versus, let's say, what you could see in Tesla.
I think Bitcoin may get to eventually as well, but that more depends actually on the dollar devaluing. While Tesla,
Yeah,
it's in current dollars basically. Personally, I would not sell too many Bitcoin at this price and change it
sure.
to Tesla. I did sell some, of course, and buy Tesla shares,
Yeah, yeah.
but if Bitcoin really hits 150 $200,000, that's the moment I would say, okay, time to go into full into Tesla. Yeah.
Got it. And from a portfolio composition, and we can take this out later on if you're uncomfortable with it, but I remember you were thinking of taking your Tesla position from, let's say, 5% of the portfolio to maybe even eventually 50%, because that's also how you're wired, right? High conviction, high
I,
concentration.
I take big position. I'm pretty big in Tesla calls, long call options, two more than 2 years out. And if that goes well, I can build a sizable Tesla position already with that. But by then, I'll very likely sell a lot more.
Yeah.
Take a very large
And then
position in Tesla. I just don't see anything else that's going to be doing as well as Tesla and
as that.
Bitcoin over the next years.
That's great. And so one last question to me, and this was like a key concern, and definitely stays in this like risk bucket, as you said, like how will governments respond to this, the changes that are going to impact society, and probably happen just a lot quicker than most people could ever envision, right? Given what AI is doing, I suppose the only hindrance here would just be how quickly you can get them off the production ramp. But my big concern has been, Elon is so prolific. From my viewpoint, I don't think we've seen a builder like this, in centuries, right? And I don't think we will either. But the key concern is what happens if he gets hit by the proverbial ice cream truck, right? What would happen to SpaceX? What would happen to Tesla? What's your kind of viewpoint, when someone kind of puts that
Yeah,
up?
I mean, of course, that's a very important point that I've looked at as well. And my conclusion is nothing will happen. I think
Okay.
he built such amazing, fantastic teams in all of his companies. I mean, they're better than any other big company that I know of. I mean, better than
Yeah.
for sure than the automotive companies that I worked at. Tesla stuff, SpaceX stuff, XAI stuff. These are the best people in the industry. And
Yeah.
basically, Elon's role is really setting the strategy and teaching people how do you need to think about the world in order to build something new. And that's this first principle thinking that he's using. And all his teams, most people have been there for years. I think 8, 9 years of top executives. These guys work day and night and they don't mind. They're so motivated. I mean, they're all
Yeah.
super rich as well because they all own shares in their company, so they make a lot of money. But if Elon falls away, I don't see any issues. You'll get a
Right.
different leadership. It's a bit like when
Yeah.
Steve Jobs left Apple or had to leave Apple, of course, because he passed away. But you know, when Tim Cook took over, I was a bit worried about it, to be honest. But I mean, Tim has done a very different job at Apple than Steve would have done. But it's still a
Yeah.
fantastic company. It's like grown incredibly since then. And so I
Yeah. Yeah.
think with Tesla
Absolutely.
and SpaceX and XAI, we'll see the same. There are good people in place to take over. And I actually think Elon will step down himself over the next years to a different role. He will not leave the companies, but he may become like an executive chairman of all his businesses and, look at strategy mostly. And I mean, he has to, right? All these companies he's running, he has no time to sleep.
Awesome, Mark. Listen, a real pleasure. Let's circle back in a few weeks. Maybe also talk a little bit deeper in on crypto, a few of the other things that we've jammed on in the past. But then I think we should be checking in on Tesla at least, every few months once there's something kind of more game changing that's happening. And yeah, let me wish you a phenomenal rest of the third quarter on your side and safe travels. All right.
All right. Well, thanks a lot. Appreciate it. And talk again soon. Yeah.